business. I'm fight break out, stop. Yes. Don't say you can put it up on me.
That's all right.
The people that's fighting just don't walk away? Are you serious? I didn't do nothing. What did I do?
Then before
What
that.
about my ID on me? Take me back for what? I didn't sell anything. I did nothing. We sitting here the whole time. Mind our business. What are you talking about? Who about you do what? Who did I sell cigarette to? To whom?
Not that rich. There's another guy in the rich.
Easy way or hard way for what? Every time you see me, you want to mess with me. I'm tired of it. It stops today.
This guy right here is forcibly trying to lock somebody up for breaking up a fight.
Everybody standing here, they told you I didn't do nothing. I did not sell nothing. Because every time you see me, you want to harass me, you want to stop me, you want to sell cigarettes. I'm minding my business, officer. I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time, please just leave me alone. Please, don't touch me. Don't touch me, please.
Hold on.
Don't touch me, please. Do not touch me. Damn.
Stop. Give us your hand, buddy.
Put your hand behind your back. I can't breathe. 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 I can't breathe.
Once again, police beating up on people. Back up right here.
Back up and get on that step.
Okay.
Back up.
All he did was break up a fight. This is what happens for breaking up a fight. This crazy.
Everybody back up, back up.
Something's wrong with him.
He can't breathe. Look, now, man, they gave this man a seizure.
Yo, move out the way. Yo.
It's my brother. We live here.
Back up this way. Everybody now back up. It's now going to become a crisis. Back it up. Back it up.
I'm going to my house.
No. This way. Let's go.
Can't go in my
In the house or that way?
All right, I'll go that way.
Pick a choice.
I'm getting my
Let's
bike.
Go. You had your chance to get your bike, sir. Staying over there. Right now we haven't seen it.
My brother right there. He was just breaking up a fight. He's alright. He's good. It has nothing to do with the fight. It has something to do with something else.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. If you notice, this last guy that we saw in the green, that's number 99. This is the perpetrator, the man who actually murdered Eric Gardner on videotape. And yet, no prosecution, no indictment. And yet, we have in South Carolina, we don't have the video of that, but we have Graham Weatherspoon with us today. So I showed that as up north, where we can't get an indictment on with a murder on screen, and yet we get an accusation in South Carolina.
Yeah, the police chief, once he saw the video, he terminated that officer from the department, and he was immediately placed under arrest. There's a couple of things. During the course of an official investigation by a police department, if you're found to be lying during the course of that investigation, at least in New York, if you're found to be lying during the course of that investigation, that's grounds for termination.
Right.
Although it's in the book, it's not carried out. And when you have deputy commissioners who lie with regard to the investigations and they're not terminated, then you can't expect a cop to be terminated for lying during the course of an investigation. And specifically, I'm referring to DCPI, Deputy Commissioner of Public Information for the police department, who deals with the press. And they release and give the press releases to the media. And it's been the history of DCPI to lie consistently with regard to the investigations that are going on and matters concerning police behavior. But deputy commissioners are not terminated for lying during the course of an investigation.
Well, why is it that in the North we couldn't get justice, but it seems to be happening in South Carolina of all places?
Well, Martin Luther King made a point many years ago. He said the Northern Negro fails to understand and fails to work with his brothers and sisters with regard to the situations that are going on. The notion that, and the illusion that the North was always treating Negroes better than the South, we have to remember that slavery existed in New York City. It existed in New York City. It was abolished in the late 30s or early 40s, but it still existed in New York City. There was a slave market at Wall Street, right at the East River at Wall Street. So we cannot forget what was going on. We cannot forget that black women were held as sex slaves in New York City in the 1800s. We cannot forget that there was a gentleman who owned the first bookstore, African-American owned bookstore in New York City. His name was Ruggles. And he was not only a purveyor of books, he was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And he lived in Lower Manhattan. And he was a master of disguise. And what he did, he went into the home. He had found out about a Negro woman who was being held as a slave, a sex slave, for a gentleman, I should say, use that term loosely, for a gentleman and his son. And what he did, he posed as a chimney sweep, and during the day, he clogged up their chimney. And when they came home and lit their fire in the house filled with smoke. Subsequent to that, he found himself walking down the street as the smoke was coming out of their house. And he offered to clear their chimney as they stood out on the street to get fresh air. And he went into the house and went into the basement and retrieved this black woman who was naked. She was deathly afraid. He said, "I'm not going to hurt you." He put his coat around her. He says, "I'm here to free you." And he brought her up to the street, and the two men said, "Where are you going with her?" He says, "She's leaving with me." And they said, "Over your dead body." And he commenced to beating those two white males in the street and left with the woman. And there was a description of this chimney sweep. It turned out to be Henry Ruggles, who a school was named after him in Bed-Stuy.
Let's talk a little bit about South Carolina and the police department.
Well, you know, there is no real difference. I must commend the chief of police for terminating that officer, and secondly, for placing him under arrest and moving to have him indicted. And they've charged him with murder, not with homicide, not with manslaughter. They charged him with murder. And that video is clear enough to see that the actions of the officer, and we've seen the desk cam, the camera from the car when he made the initial stop. And it was very evident that that officer was not in fear of his life or anything. As a matter of fact, I think he was very cordial. You don't have a license, you don't have a registration, you don't have any papers for the car. All right, well, wait here. And he was gonna run the car, obviously, to see if the car was stolen. And at that point, the guy gets out, and there was another gentleman he had taken out of the car, passenger. He had him get out of the car. But
what's the legal ramifications about someone running like that?
Well, running like that, here's the deal. You cannot shoot a man or anybody for running from you.
Oh, you can't shoot him?
You can't shoot them in the back.
That's not a felony running?
No. Flight, we expect people to run, all right? Which means we have to chase them. That's what we expect. Now, the officer had two options. Chase him on foot or stay in the car and follow him in the car.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, why waste the energy? You can drive.
He caught up with him and...
He caught up with him, right. He caught up with the guy. And then at that point, the officer took out his taser to tase him. And on the video, it's very evident that he did discharge the taser, because you saw the lines. Now, tasers don't necessarily, they don't always work on people. And I've seen them used, and I've seen guys just grab the tasers off their chest and laugh and throw the electrodes back at the officer. I've seen that. So they don't always bring down an individual. Depending upon their psychological and emotional state, it may not even work on an individual. So he fires the taser, the fellow runs, and then he goes to his weapon.
Yeah.
He draws his weapon, he takes a supported combat stance and levels off 8 shots into his back.
Why couldn't he have shot him in the leg?
Number one, why did he fire?
He had his ID, he had his car.
You get him
How
later.
far is
Right.
this guy going?
Yeah, you get the guy later.
Yeah.
Number two, we don't fire at legs and arms. Police officers are not, we don't do a Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. We don't do that flesh wound thing and shoot the gun out of a gun.
So you shoot to kill.
It's a shoot to kill because police officers are trained to shoot to center mass, the same way you were trained in the Marine Corps. Did they train you to shoot anybody in the arm or the leg?
But
I asked, that's a yes or no question.
But you see it in the movies all the time.
That's a yes or no question.
The good cops will shoot you in
That's
the
a
leg.
yes or no question.
What?
When you were in the Marine Corps, did they have a target with arms and legs on it for you to fire
I got
at?
to shoot at nothing but bullseyes. You know.
Okay, all right, well, bullseye. But you weren't looking to wing a guy in the arm or the leg. But the fact is that there was no reason to shoot the guy.
Yeah, really.
All right. Then he made up a story that this guy tried to take the taser from him.
Okay.
All right. So it's quite evident. Now, on the flip side, you have to ask, what was the point in him running in the first place?
Yeah.
That we don't know. We do know a little bit that he had an outstanding warrant for child support. That's no big deal. What are they going to do? Put you in debtor's prison because you didn't pay your child support? And if you're in prison, you still can't pay child support. But
if you run, doesn't that give the police officer more reason
it gives him more than mere suspicion.
Right.
More than mere suspicion that a crime has been committed, because now he's looking to run the license plate on the car to determine if the car is stolen. All right. So now
Put
he
yourself
bolts.
in that situation. What would you have done?
Me, I take it easy. You want to run? I'll drive. I'll follow you in the car.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
When you're tired, I'll be fresh. And I've done that with people. You know, they've run off.
Right.
I've commandeered a car, drive to the next corner, get out of the car, and wait for them as they're coming towards me.
You would never even chase them. You
I
had his ID.
have chased people. I've chased people 4 and 5
But
blocks.
you had his ID. Why not?
Yeah.
Let him?
You don't have to shoot the guy. You know, I had to chase a guy in downtown Brooklyn from Fulton Street through a playground, over a 7-foot fence, across Atlantic Avenue, and somewhere up near the 7-8 precinct. It was like a 4 or 5 block run, but I was in shape for it. I didn't mind chasing the guy. If he wanted to run, he could run. But it's not about shooting the guy. You don't shoot a person who poses no threat to you or anybody else. You have no grounds to shoot.
All right, I got one for you. What would you have done? We ran the Eric Gardner tape. What would you have done if you had been an officer on duty at the time and you were watching what went on?
I would have told him to get off him, period. You get off him. The guy's on the ground, he's choking. He says he can't breathe. What are you doing? You crazy?
So one of the officers should have said something.
Right. Again, Staten Island, unlike South Carolina, Staten Island, the DA, and let's look at this, because the DA did not choose to present a case to get an indictment, and the DAs have that prerogative. That's why we need to do away with this grand jury system as it is, because the DA can skew the grand jury to present any kind of case he wants to get the results that he wants from that grand jury. You want no true bill, which means no indictment, or you get a true bill when you move ahead to go towards a trial. What Donahue did was he skewed the case in such a way that a grand jury would not indict. It's what is being presented and only what is being presented to the grand jury. Same thing in a trial. So people can only rule on the information that they're given. And people need to know, when you're sitting in a grand jury, you can pose questions to the DA.
When you're sitting
in the grand jury, and this people don't know and understand, you have the right to write down a question, give it to the jury foreman, and ask the DA, well, why didn't this, or how come this, or what is the meaning of this? You have the right to ask those questions in the grand jury. Because the jury, how can a jury rule on something when they don't have complete information? You don't have total information. And when you go into any trial, any legal proceeding with a jury, the jury the jurors are the last people to know anything, and sometimes they're the only people that know nothing. So it's incumbent upon the jurors to ask certain questions. But again, the judge will skew a case by, in the summation and charging the jury, he is only going to tell them the law as it applies to the charges to the individual. And depending upon how that case was presented by the DA or by the defense, that's all they have to work with. Those are the only parameters that they have to work with. So when you have a closed grand jury such as we have here, and people say, oh, you know, we can't expose the witnesses because their lives would be in jeopardy. Well, there are 7 states across the country, I think Pennsylvania is one of them. They don't have a closed grand jury. No one's been shot to death because they've testified in the grand jury in the United States in I don't know how many years. So that story, or to have people believe their life would be in danger, that's not the case. Secondly, DAs have immunity from prosecution in New York State.
Right.
That's another problem with the system, because they can knowingly and intentionally fail to represent the victim, as they do in police shootings. They fail to represent the victim and seek to protect the defendant.
And the DA in Staten Island is running for Congress.
He now has, this is how sin is multiplied.
Yeah.
You had this guy Grimm, a former FBI agent who ran for Congress, ran for Congress, became a congressman, is now under indictment and will go to prison.
What was his name?
Grimm, G-R-I-M-M.
Right.
Fitting term, fitting
The
name.
one that threatened a news reporter.
Yeah, he threatened the news reporter, threatened that he called him all kinds of names and everything, and threatened to throw him over a balcony. But that was a side issue. That's not why he's been indicted. But he's been indicted. He will go to trial, and now he is stepping down, and Donahue wants to run for that seat. Now, Donahue will invariably get the seat because Donahue protected this cop, or these cops in Staten Island with regard to Garner. That's the DA. So all of the cops in Staten Island.
It's in Grimm's district.
Right.
Okay.
They're going to vote. They're going to vote to put Donahue in the U.S. Congress. This is just how that's going to work.
Grimm's was accused of bribery?
I can't even remember what the charges were. I think they had more than a dozen charges on him. But, you know, he's going to be gone. He's done. He's toast.
Right.
So Donahue now has provided this great disservice to a man who's been murdered. And he's going to use the people that he protected to launch him further up the food chain into the U.S. Congress. So you have to wonder, why is it that justice is continually being denied is being denied to people of color, the poor, this American caste system that we have. Remember, we had a case a few years ago wherein a woman who works in a hotel was raped by the guy from the IMF. All right?
He was president of the IMF.
President of the IMF. And Ken Thompson, who at that time was acting as her private attorney, took that case and sought to take that case to trial. And Manhattan DA Vance allowed him to leave the country and said there wasn't substantial information there to prosecute this guy. But when he got home, he was arrested and charged for rape in France because he did the same thing with another woman there. You see, so there's a pattern. And we don't know what powers or what forces came to play in that case to even tell Cyrus Vance to let him go. I don't know if it was Cyrus Vance himself or that came from higher up the food chain.
Of course.
You see, so when the DA fails to advocate for the victim of the crime, we have a serious problem. So for them to have immunity from prosecution when they're consistently failing, and in addition to failing, they are intentionally failing. You need to look at the pattern of these DAs. They are getting indictments by bringing 40, 50, 60 people to present a case in the grand jury.
Let's go back. Let's go to the old man shooting at the most recent.
Wait, let me just finish. Let me just finish with the grand jury, because when they're bringing all these people to the grand jury, that becomes Rosario material, which has to be turned over. All that information is turned over to the defense in the event of an indictment. all right? Which means that's all their trial prep information. So they're knowingly and intentionally exposing all of their witness material to the defense to help the defense prepare for the trial. All right? You can get an indictment with 1 or 2 people. You don't have to call 40 witnesses. Save those 40 witnesses for your trial and then bring them in at trial at the time. You have a jury list, you have not a jury's list, a witness list that you present to the defense, but they should know what that person is going to discuss. But what they're doing, they're bringing them to the grand jury so they have all that information in the trial prep to give a better defense for the cop after he's done something negligent. Now, on to the
old man, the 73-year-old.
72, 73-year-old
73, my age, out there playing
police
cowboy.
aide playing cops
Cowboy.
and robbers.
Mistakenly shooting somebody.
Shoots a guy.
Or he finally got a chance to kill somebody.
And you know, he said on the video, "Oh my God, I'm sorry." He carries a taser, and he's carrying a firearm. I'll tell you something. When you're out there in uniform, you know where everything on your gun belt is. You're not looking for it.
But this particular case, it was an undercover sting operation.
Yes, he was
Why
selling.
was he there?
That's what I'd like to know. Why is this old man, who is not a police officer, he's a police aide or something of that nature, working with the police?
He was there for the excitement.
And he's trained. He's been doing that type of work for the last couple of years. But he's an insurance man.
Right.
He sells insurance.
Right.
I don't know why he was there involved in the transaction to take this guy down, but the use of the alleged intent to use the taser. See, when I draw my weapon, I don't just draw it and start, you know.
You got to take the safety off.
Well, my weapon doesn't have safety. It depends on which weapon I'm using.
Okay.
The weapon I'm carrying today has no safety. All right, others do. But the thing is, as you don't just boom, you know, thrust your gun at somebody and also the grip on a handgun is not identical to the grip on a taser.
Right.
The taser has a rectangular grip, and that's intentional so you can feel. All right, you don't have to see something to know what it is. You can feel.
Right.
I've done presentations with young people, and I tell them, you have to know your craft front to back. And while I'm talking to them, I dismantle my weapon.
But why would you come up with such a jive statement like that?
Well, you got to say something. You got to say something.
I made a mistake. I shot him.
But
I thought it was my taser.
The problem here is, why is this man out there playing police at age 73?
Exactly.
Why? And why is he involved in the arrest of an individual when you have an operation for gun sales, illegal gun sales? Why do you have this man involved in that transaction?
Yeah.
He never should have been there. That is something where you have your specialized units that handle that. They're trained for that. They're not just that they're a police officer, all right? But when you go into a specialized unit, you have further training. Right. When I worked at the various plainclothes units I worked in, we only trained. We didn't train with service revolvers. So when we went to the range in preparing to do what we were going to do, we didn't carry service revolvers. We carried other weapons.
Right.
So we had to qualify with the other weapons, with the other firearms that we were using, and then we had other training and tactics that we had to use as a plainclothes officer, because people will always say, well, I didn't know he was a cop. That's the first statement, I didn't know he was a cop. Right? So there were different tactics that we use even in taking the individual down. That old man wasn't trained for that. He wasn't trained to do firearms transactions.
And I understand cops in that neighborhood are supposed to retire at 58.
Well, yeah. And I don't know why you have a guy
73.
73 walking around out here.
I mean, he didn't look too fit anyway.
You know, I couldn't go back and work. I'm too old to work as a detective in New York City.
Well, running down the street. I mean, my God.
And at 73, you can't do policing in New York past 62.
62.
And anybody that's working at age 62, I have to question. You know, it depends on what they're doing. You know, if they're inside doing something, that's one thing. But out on the street,
chasing gangsters down the street.
no.
a known felon. This guy's selling guns.
Especially if you're not in shape to do it. You see.
So why is he out there? He's paying somebody else. And the other incident I saw recently, this cop hit a guy that was shooting in the street with his car.
Ran the guy over? Yeah.
Ran him over. And that's legal.
They said they had to do it.
To save his life.
What did the guy do? I'm not sure what the guy did. Was it a shooting or something?
He was walking down the street. He must have been crazy because he was shooting in the air.
All right.
He was pointing a gun at himself. And he was walking down the street, and there was a car, they had the cam recorder on the dash cam. You saw the video. So he's following the guy down the street nice and slow, and this other guy just zigzags around him and then rams him.
Ran him right over. And they said the guy was in the hospital for 2 days, and then he was out, and they took him in to book him. That kind of disregard for human life, that's as heinous as shooting somebody.
But you being an ex-police officer, I mean, what kind of knuckleheads do these people look like to you? I mean, why are they, they've put shame to the police departments around the world.
You know, my mother used to call me every time a cop did something stupid.
Okay.
And when Michael Stewart got killed, she was blowing my phone up. I said, "What are you calling me for? I wasn't there. I'm not involved."
But you're a cop.
I knew all the cops that were involved.
Yeah.
And the cop that caused it, his name was Kostick. He was a chronic problem. You see, he was a problem. But his mentor was another cop whom I investigated, and he wound up going to prison for brutality. So
Del Dibio.
No, not Del Dibio. Del Dibio shot Desmond Robinson. It was Pete Marsala, who was the idol. It was idolized by this kid, Kostick. And Kostick stopped Michael Stewart for writing something on a wall, some graffiti with a pen. I mean, that kind of stupidity is stupid. And when the units got there, he said he was holding a prisoner. When the car got there, he didn't have a prisoner in custody. Michael Stewart was just standing there. So this guy was not under his control. He wasn't handcuffed, but he called and said he was holding one.
All right, let's take a quick look at Michael Brown, and we'll go on from there. We're waiting for Professor Jeffries. It's almost 5:30 now, but hopefully, let's go to Michael Brown, and we'll come right back at you. All right?
Of all the intense reactions that ruled Ferguson Monday night,
I'm angry.
These people work very hard for this business right here.
None were stronger than those of Michael Brown's parents, as they learned the grand jury would not indict Officer Darren Wilson. The New York Times posted a video that showed the raw emotion the moment they heard the news. What caught many people's attention in that video were the words of Michael Brown's stepfather that could be seen as a call to violence to protesters. As the clip gained traction on the web, some noted the words were in direct contradiction to Michael Brown Sr.'s PSA released earlier in the week.
Hurting others or destroying property is not the answer. No matter what the grand jury decides, I do not want my son's death to be in vain.
On Tuesday, the Brown family attorney addressed the video and criticized those who would hold it against them.
Raw emotion, not appropriate at all, completely inappropriate, and, you know, God forbid your child is killed the way they kill, and then they get that just devastating announcement in the manner it was announced, and somebody put a camera on your face. What would be your immediate reaction? So don't condemn them for being human.
It's all according to how we handle things. You know, there's a right way and a wrong way. And as we've been talking about how officers deal with the public. And we as the public have to learn how to deal with officers and understand that we don't know what kind of, we've got Graham Weatherspoon here, who's a good guy, and which seems to be a rarity amongst police officers. I mean, well, 10% of bad cops in New York gives us a whole bunch.
Well, 1% would be a
apple.
whole lot. That's, you know, 1% of 35,000 is 350. That would be a major crime wave.
Yeah,
if you have,
right.
350 armed individuals roaming around the
Aren't
city.
there that many?
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
You know,
1 out of 10 is a rogue
we've had
cop.
numerous
But what do you do
problems.
as a good cop to prevent that kind of stuff?
Well, what I did as a detective when I ran across a bad cop, he lost his job.
Okay.
You know, you're a rapist, you're gone.
You think 90% of the officers out there would do that?
No.
No.
I was handling a case. It was a rape case of a 15-year-old girl by a probationary police officer.
Wow.
And my partner says, "You're going to ruin this cop's career for this girl. You know, she's trash."
Your partner?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said she's trash. You know.
So that's what really goes on.
So I said, "Well, yeah, I'm taking him down." I said, "We'll let him go when he's raping your daughter."
Ooh, yeah.
And he shut his mouth at that
right.
point.
But that's that blue wall of silence.
Yeah, you know, there are...
Like this guy in the South Carolina case, he had a brother come up behind him, the second officer, and back...
Trying to
back him up on this story about the taser.
What are you handcuffing a corpse for?
Was he dead at that point?
Oh, please. He got 9 hits. 9 hits with an automatic weapon. You're not going to be really breathing after 9 hits in the back. And it also depends upon the type of ammunition that you're carrying. Whether you're carrying ball, semi-jacketed ammo, hollow point, it depends upon the ammunition.
I just run the video of Dr. Ben, and we'll come right back at you. We have Dr. Jeffries on the set now. All right, just run the Dr. Ben clip, and we'll come right back at you. Come on, Doc.
Actually hit. You made it. Almost cool. Sign at the TV. Sign at the TV. Sign at the TV.
Dr. Joseph Alfredo Antonio Ben Buchanan, 1918-2015. Dr. Joseph Alfredo Antonio Ben Buchanan, affectionately known as Dr. Ben, was the premier multi-genius of our time, and as such, he cannot be defined nor scrutinized by Western academic standards, given the fact that he forever altered how classical African civilizations, in particular in the Nile Valley, are viewed, interpreted, studied in academia. Thus, Dr. Ben stands alone as he represents the ceiling in which we can rise to. We highly praise Dr. Ben for his great love of African humanity in the Nile Valley.
Peace and Black Power, family. This is your brother Sarnetta coming back at you once again. Sarnetta TV, Black News 102, Sarnetta Studios. We are coming at you once again, and we are doing this free. Remember, the key word is free for the people. It's going down, the funeral of Dr. Ben. We're going to be celebrating Thursday the 9th. Yes, it's going down Thursday the 9th between the hours of 4 to 8 o'clock. And if you wish to see this live on live stream, I will be live in it. I will be showing it live. All you got to do is go to YouTube. And when you go to YouTube, punch in the search bar Africa Online TV. You see it right there. You can't miss it. We don't want to hear no excuses. I'm going to be doing this for y'all, for the family who've been showing the love and the support. Ashwa Kwesi is going to be coming through. There's going to be a lot of scholars and a lot of teachers. Professor James Smalls, Booker T, you name it. Everybody is coming through for this last go round for Dr. Ben. The funeral is going down.
Here's one I didn't watch thoroughly. So welcome to the show. I thought it was a little bit more than that. Welcome to the show, Doc.
Well, it's always good to be with the family.
Thank you.
Especially for important occasions.
Well, you promised to come at least once a month, right?
Well, no, I will. I don't mind.
It's on a. Oh, Dr. Ben, yeah, good guy.
A special spirit force moving through our global community. I try to tell folks he was not a saint, and he was very human, but he was on a mission.
Right.
And his mission was to deliver to African people the gift, I call the gift that keeps on giving, the Nile Valley.
Right.
And no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, if you've tapped into the Nile Valley, everything else will be transforming. And so he was very supportive of me all during the 50 years that I knew him. And so that I know the power of his transformative presence.
He taught at Princeton for how many years?
No, Cornell.
Cornell, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Cornell.
Right.
Princeton would have had a hard time with Dr. Ben.
That's right.
But Cornell, he was with the Africana Studies and Research Center between 15 and 16 years.
Okay.
But Dr. James Turner and the others up at Cornell had established an important and independent research center. And so he provided a dynamic component, so much so that one of the white scholars at Cornell, who wrote a 3-volume study entitled Black Athena, and that was Martin Burnell, Dr. Martin Burnell. He used to sit in on Dr. Ben's lectures, and then they'd have discussions, etc. So Dr. Martin Burnell was a linguist, comes from strong roots. His grandfather Gardner, wrote the encyclopedia on the Egyptian language. And he also had, that's the English side, and I think there was also a Jewish side. Well, this brother, the subtitle for the book was, volume 1 was The Falsification of Classical Greece. From 1785 to 1985. In other words, he pinpointed the universities, the scholars, the people who specifically created the Aryan myth that there was a northern serious component to Greek civilization. When Dr. Ben and other scholars were saying it is the southern component that gave the Greek elders of ancient times the ability to create a synthesis that could be called civilization. Barbarism was the reality in the north, and civilization was the reality in the south and east.
Well, explain how all of us going to Western style schools taught us that beginnings of time came from Greece, and yet Greece was developed by the ancient Egyptians.
Yes, the ancient Africans, the Egyptians, and it's so clear because they stated it. They pointed out that when they went into the Nile Valley, they discovered the means to read. So many of them, they all, no one said that any of their culture came from the north. They all acknowledged that it was the marvelous civilization developed thousands of years before the Greeks that they emulated. And so when you're talking about mathematics and philosophy and medicine, those were developed in the Nile Valley and then passed on to other people. But you can't give the Nile Valley credit because those in the Nile Valley were people of color. And so the lie upon which Western civilization has been built, that God chose people that are of European background to deliver to the world high culture and civilization. That means mathematics, science, engineering, philosophy, various philosophical and religious traditions. And clearly, when you go to the Nile Valley and you see the pyramids there that were built thousands of years before the first Greek could read or write. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what Dr. Ben stood for, and he lived for. And so people have to understand that the great truth of who and what we are is what And he started out in 1938, when I was 1 year old, on a mission impossible to try to claim our true history. And by himself. He didn't have a posse. He didn't have a movement.
Where was Dr. Clark in that?
Dr. Clark had just a few years before come up from the South, not in a coach or a carriage, but he hoboed it up from the South. And the two of them met in New York.
At the Schomburg?
Particularly after World War II. And their chemistry and their brotherhood led to so much of what we've done. We stand on the shoulders of these giants. And to see them develop a brotherhood of sharing and supporting, never publicly disagreeing in a negative way, always creating a dynamic return. That's the model that I have. Of the two greatest scholars in my life, it's Dr. Clark, the elder, and Dr. Ben, his partner. And so if people want to know why Dr. J has done all that he did, well, I had my own foundation. And then I had many years in Africa before I met Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark. But they taught me how to use this knowledge to not get seduced into believing that the Europeans and the Greeks and others were the chosen people. The Creator and the Mother Nature chose us to be the first with the mostest on planet Earth.
It's our nature to give and love and
to learn the mysteries of life and learn the laws of nature. The Nile Valley itself created a dynamic that forced the Africans with a mind to create the things that many of them did. Because if the Nile Valley overflows its banks and you don't remove yourself, you'll drown. So that dynamic of the overflow of the river valleys created so much. The economics with the fertilizing of the soil, the politics to manage this dynamic economics, and then the culture to let you know what this economic political process was all about, how it was hooked to the heavenly bodies, how it was hooked to the universe. Because when the Nile began to overflow its banks and the river began to rise, a certain set of stars was here in the heaven. And then after the Nile overflows its banks, a certain set of stars are in another position in the heaven. Then when you plant your crops and is ready for the harvest, that certain set of stars is in another position. So you began to read the heavenly bodies and design your agriculture, your political systems, your spiritual. It's a fantastic story. And that's not a story that can come out of the caves. The European culture was a cave culture.
Explain that.
Well, the thing is, if you're in the
When we were building pyramids, the European was in the cave.
Yes, because that great ice age called the Worm Ice Age, W-U-R-M, the Wormian Ice Age dominated Europe over the last 100,000 years. 90,000 of it was what we consider the Ice Age. And the only way you can survive the Ice Age is to find yourself a cave and hope that Mama Bear and the little bears are not there, because otherwise you're going to have a fight on your hand to try to remove the bears. So we need to understand the dynamics of the cultures of the sun, the river valleys, which had the gardens of Eden to be able to produce surplus economically, and that surplus allowed for diversification of the culture. And so when you understand the dynamics of the river valleys, the Nile River Valley, the Niger River Valley in Africa, the Tigris-Euphrates out of Africa and Asia, the Indus Valley and the Yellow River Valley in China and India, you can see the difference between the caves of Europe, where you could only function your cave. For example, if you found a large cave, it might be as large as this space that we're filming.
Where are we now? We're back in the cave.
Well, the thing is, we've got the cave mentality.
Okay.
And the
Let me show you.
African mentality was to see the
I've
universe
got you.
writ
I've got
large.
one for you, Doc. I've got a video of what with elevated Kenya. What is it?
West.
Kenya. Kanye West.
Right.
And he's got a video up that I want you to spend few minutes watching to show you what they're doing with the symbolism of ancient Egypt.
Right.
All right? Run this clip. Strange enough, but you see all that ancient Egyptian. Now, the Masonic Order is supposed to have been started in ancient Egypt. So Professor Smalls did a paper on it.
Well, the tradition that becomes the Masonic Order has deep roots. And that traditional deep root is deep in the river valleys, particularly the Nile River Valley. Horus is the Greek name for the child of the
Isis,
Greek name, Set, African name.
Okay.
The male component of the Trinity, for the Greeks it would be Osiris. For the Africans it would be Asar. So you have Set and Asar, the male, the female and the male figure, and their mating produces the child, Heru, which the Greeks call Horus.
Okay.
And that is part of an early Trinity.
Right.
That's a part of our modern tradition.
Right.
But the roots of it go deep into Africa. So you're talking about the son of the symbol of God.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw a lot of symbols that are being played with in a Hollywood fashion or musical fashion. So it's for entertainment. It's for creating mystery. It's not for enlightenment and knowledge. So that's what has happened. The traditions that Africans developed come out of thousands of years of trying to understand the mysteries. The mystery of the universe, the mystery of human life, the mystery of plant life. And so to play with the symbolism and not with the meanings is very superficial. But some people may be fascinated by it. You saw in the back, he was in a hall of columns. And that's a deep African tradition of the pillared temple. Now, when we think about Greece, we think about the Parthenon, and on the Parthenon, the Acropolis. The Parthenon was on the Acropolis. That's the higher level where the Greeks built their most important buildings. And the leading building was the Parthenon, which was a pillared temple.
Mm-hmm.
A direct copy from the Great Pillared Temple along the Nile, which was the Grand Lodge of the orders, forming brotherhoods and sisterhoods to transfer knowledge so that they could be better leaders and lead in a godly way. So in the Great Lodge, for example, of Waset, in an area now called Luxor, and in the time of the Greeks called Thebes, but Waset was the ancient African name. So the temple of Waset, in the great center hall, those 44 pillars, each of them has a philosophical meaning.
Okay.
Because there are 42 basic principles of the system of Ma'at, and that's the philosophical system that the Africans laid down that represents truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, reciprocity, balance, order. And that was the large philosophical process that the Africans were involved in. So all of this stuff does not get to any of that. It just shows you familiar symbols. It flashes some of the Masonic symbolism. And most of those deep traditions that we have come out of our deep cultures that thought about them. The 42 principles of Ma'at are built into the architecture. So you have a column not just on beauty and functionality, you have a column that is spiritual and philosophical. And each column represents a moral and ethical principle. And then there are two of the 42, you add two columns, and they represent the nomes. That's the political center of the north and the south, the upper and the lower lands of what we called Kemet or Egypt. So what Dr. Ben led us to is not just gawking at monuments or enormous construction or gold mass. He said there's a deep culture, there's a spiritual culture, there's a philosophical culture, there's inner knowledge. There's knowledge that helps you negotiate the universe. So most people had no idea what he was about. They thought that he took people and they had a chance to be tourists. No, we went to the Nile Valley for a pilgrimage. And most people don't understand that that was the most prominent pilgrimage center, Abydos, of the ancient world.
Yeah.
And that's long before other places became the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, the pilgrimage to Mecca, the pilgrimage to Rome. You had a spiritual center built into this culture. So the culture is so deep, it's beyond, it's beyond
But they've
understanding.
reduced it to a Hollywood
That's what they have to do.
Right.
They reduced Dr. Ben to a fallen star whose ideas were contentious. They're not contentious. They're the foundation ideas for the development of high culture and civilization. He's not a fallen star. He has joined the stars. He comes from the stars and he has joined the stars. So they've purposely twisted all of the stuff that we consider, and they consider important, so you could hide the truth that this one black man, inspired by his father, and with the love of his mother, who had Puerto Rican roots, was able to heal some difficulty he had in growing up, being the blackest thing in that family.
Yeah.
And so that love of mother helped him to heal that. But then the father said, go pursue this larger truth. Not for your personal glory. Dr. Ben did not seek personal glory. His thing was to lead us in the right direction. So when he was asked to be a part of the 10th anniversary of the Million Man March, he did not go to the first one. I did, and Professor Smalls, and we, Sons of Africa, did. And we were there with the 1 million or 2 black men looking for and searching for a way, a better way to raise ourselves up. Well, Dr. Ben was glad to go for the 10th anniversary, and I missed my call to speak because I wanted to make sure he got a chance to speak to his piece to the world. And but he was so busy worried about other things when I was there to push his wheelchair up to the mic. And I had to actually tell him, because his mind is going all the time. I said, Dr. Ben, you got to focus. You got to focus. You got to make your statement. Don't worry about those things. And so I was right next to him, making sure that he focused. And when it looked like he might go astray, I said, Dr. Ben, tell him about the Tekken. Tell him about the Tekken. And the Tekken is the Washington Monument. So then he got back on his path, and he started yelling in the mic, turn around, turn around. And these hundreds of thousands or 1 million brothers were wondering, what is this old man talking about? Turn around, turn around. And then many began to turn around, and then most turned around. And then he explained the meaning of the symbol of ancient Egypt, Kemet, that is in Washington, D.C., and it has been dedicated and consecrated to be the most significant symbol in Washington. No building can be taller than it, and it represents the power of our ancient people.
Thank you for coming. I'm sorry that we have run out of time. The God in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned.